So, could President Macron actually pardon his predecessor Nicolas Sarkozy? I mean, on paper, the French Constitution seems to give him a clear green light. But the reality? Well, it's a total political and legal minefield. We're going to break down exactly why this power, which seems so straightforward, is pretty much impossible to use in this specific case.
Welcome to Le Change. A lot of you in the community have been asking this very question, and honestly, it's a fascinating one. At its heart, you've got this tangled knot of law, politics, and, well, personality. So let's get into it and untangle that first thread. What power does the president actually have?
Okay, so where does this whole idea of a presidential pardon even come from? This isn't just some dusty old tradition. Nope, it's a specific right, and it's written directly into the French Constitution. It gives the president a power that feels, well, it feels almost royal.
This power is officially known as the grâce présidentielle. And what it means is that the president has the authority to look at someone who's been convicted and just wipe their sentence away, either the whole thing or just part of it. I mean, think about that for a second. That's the power to single-handedly override a final decision made by the entire judicial system. And here it is, Article 17 of the Constitution. It's crystal clear. It says the president has the right to grant a pardon on an individual basis. It's a personal power, belonging only to the head of state. So, case closed, right? Seems simple enough. If Macron wants to do it, he can. But this is exactly where theory smashes right into a wall of legal reality.
Right. So even though the Constitution says yes, a pardon for Nicolas Sarkozy faces some absolutely massive legal roadblocks. It's just not that simple.
For a pardon to even get off the ground, 4 really key conditions have to be met. And as you're about to see, when it comes to Sarkozy's case, pretty much every single one of these presents a huge problem. So let's just tackle that very first hurdle, finality. For a pardon to even be on the table, the conviction has to be totally final. No more appeals left. So the big question is Nicolas Sarkozy's conviction actually final?
And the answer is a very loud, very clear no. The law is super explicit about this. You can only pardon a final conviction. Sarkozy has appealed his sentence, which means the whole legal process is still playing out. And as long as that appeal is in motion, a pardon is legally impossible. Full stop.
Okay, but let's just imagine for a second that the appeal process does end. What would be the next step? What would Sarkozy himself have to do to even become eligible for a pardon? And here's the real catch-22. You have to formally ask for a pardon. But, and this is the crucial part, making that request is legally seen as an admission of guilt. You just can't ask for forgiveness for a crime you say you never committed. And Nicolas Sarkozy has always maintained his innocence.
So beyond all the legal rules that apply to Sarkozy, we've got to look at the man who would actually grant the pardon, President Macron. And, his own track record with this power adds a whole other layer of doubt to this story.
1. Just 1. That is the total number of times Emmanuel Macron has used his right to pardon since he took office back in 2017. Once. That single number tells you pretty much everything you need to know about how he feels about using this particular power. And that one time? It couldn't be more different from this situation. It wasn't for a fellow politician or a public figure. It was for an elderly woman who was convicted of murder, and the pardon was granted on purely humanitarian grounds. That precedent makes a political pardon for a former president seem, well, even more unlikely. So let's bring all these different pieces together. What you've got is this clear constitutional power on one side, and then this huge mountain of practical and legal obstacles on the other.
So you can basically see it like this. On one side of the scale, you have the theory, a clear constitutional right for the president. But on the other side, reality weighs a whole lot heavier. You've got a conviction that isn't final, a defendant who absolutely will not admit guilt, and a sitting president who has shown he is extremely reluctant to ever use this power.
But, this story isn't quite over. What happens if the appeal fails? What if the conviction does become final? Suddenly, that first massive obstacle just vanishes. And the question of a pardon? It would roar back to life, more intense and more politically explosive than ever before.
The source material from Le Change really invites its community to keep this fascinating discussion going, and we want to hear from you too. What do you think would happen then?